just to scare you further and why you might want to leave it to the professionals, this is an example of an asset tracking sheet. And that is probably about 20% of one course. That row up there says S. It goes on and on and on. Notice the tabs at the bottom as well. We do most of our tracking in Google Documents, Google. So our advice for you, our consejo, is seek advice early and often from professionals on your campus in terms of studying this. We talked a little bit about resources that you might want to look at for further information. For this particular slide, it might be easiest to just take a picture. The question is, would my presentation be available? The answer is yes. I will leave it with that.
Also, they have received the two sheets about the references that you gave us. Gave me this morning.
One of the questions yesterday was, are there examples of websites that offer public domain, Creative Commons? It's a partial list, but I hope this is helpful for you. Questions so far? I also thought you might like to look at Khan Academy. Khan Academy started in Silicon Valley. It was a scientist who was helping his either nephew or niece with their homework. That's when he realized there was such a need to have multiple media to help. In those days, it was primarily for high school and below. Now it's worldwide, and they're now working and having presence. Like this one is in Spanish. People are also asking me for resources for learning more about learning objectives. Professor Karen Wilcox from MIT has wonderful information that I thought you might want to have. I hope I have this right. The next one I'll show you is, let's see. Oh, there are links from here that are very geeky, nerdy. This particular website goes much in depth from an MIT science point of view. But if you're interested, and I know some of you are, about data visualization and deep research, I advise or suggest that you might want to visit it. For me, I only understand it. One of the questions I received yesterday was, how do I learn more? Can I take a MOOC and learn a lot more than what you were telling me today and yesterday? This professor, Professor Barbara Oakley, comes from UC San Diego, and it is the most popular course on the Coursera platform. Her course usually attracts maybe 700,000 people. It sounds simple. It's called Learning How to Learn. It's very good, and the reason I thought you might also like it is she made this entire course for under $10,000. She made it herself, in her basement, with her husband. The production values are different from what we do at Harvard X, but I found it very refreshing. She came at Harvard X. We have a research lunch every Friday from 12 to 1:30. It's open. Typically, it's always Harvard and MIT. And anybody who is in town that knows about it can come. And so now we have it at Harvard one week and MIT the other week. Most of the time, unfortunately, we do not live stream it, only because we just don't get around to it. But it's a wonderful place to come. If you want to come see Harvard X, come on a Friday and please join the lunch. It involves everything from Professor Barbara Oakley came to speak, doctoral students. We talked a little bit yesterday about a doctoral student from MIT finding ways to verify people were cheating. That's an example of that research. He came and presented at a Friday workshop. Research is so important to us that we hold this lunch every Friday during the school year. I also thought this was a good example of further information if you'd like to explore. It's at Vanderbilt University, Understanding by Design. It is my understanding that everything I've told you so far is free. At Coursera, recently, they still have courses that are free. It's not obvious that they're free. So when you log in, you have to be very tenacious, very directed, because you'll go through, don't you want to buy a certificate? We also do a little bit of that at edX. But recently, Coursera moved to a business model where you are still able to get the course content, but you can only get the assessments and the certificate of completion if you pay. But they do have to survive, and we have different ways of creating revenue for ourselves as well through the edX platform. It's a challenge. We're not very good at that yet. I thought I would open it up for questions and maybe some answers from yesterday. Do people have some follow-up questions? I must have been very clear.
How much was Coursera, more or less?
The question is, how much does Coursera cost to take a course? Or to make it?
For getting the certificate. Just curious, actually.
Sure. I don't know about Coursera, but at edX, if you want to take a course, like I said, but if you want a certificate of completion, assuming you completed, it's called a ID verifier. The camera takes a picture of it, and you say, you hold up your government document, like a driver's license. And so the lowest is $49, and the highest is probably maybe 100 and maybe 250, and everything in between. But as a reminder, you don't have to do that to take the course. People like to take it because they like to show schools. It's not credit. It's a certificate of completion. Maybe they want to show a future employer. Maybe they want to show a current employer because they want to advance their career. I personally was very surprised how many people choose to buy the ID verified certificate. We have a course right now on contract law, and it's not contract law as you would think of it. The professor I mentioned to yesterday has written what people consider the de facto book on contract law, but his course, I love his course, it's finding contracts and negotiations in your everyday life. In fact, I didn't know I was going to do this. I want to show you a trailer from his course. Later, we'll talk a little bit about, in fact, if we don't get there, let me talk about it quickly now. On your rainbow document, you'll see between production and pre-production a line that says marketing communication. And so we started to make trailers, small, actually we've pretty much done this from the beginning. where we make trailers and we send them on social media. Trailers like a movie trailer to show what the course will be like. And recently, we've even been making teasers, which are maybe 12, 14 seconds. A trailer we try to make under 2 minutes. Ideally, the trailer is under 1 minute. But I question for you, if you have a MOOC or maybe a website, what is a MOOC or a website without any marketing or promotion? We call that CREACION. So when we're talking to Professor Charlie for contract law, he wanted to do a case study, taking law and bring them to life through illustration. What I'm about to show you is Professor Freed in the studio, and then he'll go into case law, but he wanted to visualize the cases through pictures. And first thing I thought of was, very, very expensive. But we figured out a way, in fact, it really is the course producer that figured this out. He asked us for pictures of ourselves, and we didn't know why. And then we said, you have to tell us why. So he had a list of cases. One was a bad shipment of wood and negotiation and contract. In your everyday life, remember this, it's contract and negotiation all your day. So we had one was on wood and it was a bad shipment of wood. Many different combinations, many different examples. But there was one example where somebody was hit by a car and people had to sign up to say which one they would be. I would say over 50% of the people wanted to be the one that was hit by a car. I didn't get that. So let me show you an example of a trailer we made for him to demonstrate what people would experience when they took the course. Oh. We're going to test how fast your internet is. Ah, yes. Because most of the content I've been showing is not online, it did not carry the captions. This one should carry the subtitles and captions. Thank you. Jorge. Oh, I know. So, this was happens when we're spontaneous.
Hello, I'm Charles Freed. I've been teaching contract law at Harvard Law School off and on for some 35 years.
I want to interrupt you because I want the caption. Or maybe not. I always think it's not a real technology demo unless something fails. I think I'll go back to that. You're going to get sick of that first 3 notes, I think.
Hello, I'm Charles Free. I've been teaching contract law at Harvard Law School off and on for some 35 years. I've written books and articles on contract law, and I've argued contract cases in state and federal courts. My students have become lawyers and judges all around the world. And now I want to use this new technology to bring the subject to you. Not particularly because you too may want to be lawyers and to practice in this field of law, but more generally because contracts are an important and pervasive aspect of your lives together, and this course will help you to understand why and how they work. In this respect, it's very much like a course on human biology. You may or may not want to be doctors, but you should want to know how your body works, so you will know when to call the doctor and can understand and judge whether what the doctor tells you makes sense. In this course, we start by putting contracts in their human setting. What human needs do contracts meet, and what aspects of our humanity do contracts depend on and serve? Only then will we move to the mechanics of contracts, what promises do and do not make a contract, offer and acceptance, how contracts are made, and what happens when contracts go wrong, some of the nuts and bolts, but always in the human and social context in which these issues arise and are solved. That's one reason why we will examine famous cases and meet famous judges. There is another reason as well. Some of these cases tell wonderful stories. That's one reason I love the law, because law is everywhere in our lives. And in learning about law, we also learn about all kinds of things, expected and unexpected, about life.
Professor Free just turned 80. He's very good on camera. We spent about 4 different shoots with Charles, and we tried different venues. We tried it in white, we tried it on black, we tried it with a script. He's an example of somebody that the more it was rehearsed, the more there was a script, the more there was a teleprompter, the worse he got. So we just went back to letting him teach as he teaches. There are other questions yesterday. Yes, David.
I have a new question. It has to do with the certificate and also with the contract. So have you ever had a case when somebody wanted the certificate, but you found, as well as yesterday, that he has or she has cheated? For instance, with the IP, or you have found that
It's a great question. To the best of my knowledge, we have not connected those two. I cannot tell you. When we did our research, well, actually, it was a young man named Curtis Northam from MIT. When we do research like this, we are doing it with data after it's been cleaned, after it's been de-anonymized. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but in other words, the researcher does not know who, right? Because that would be an infringement on the students themselves. We have the ability to find that out. We did not choose to pursue that. And it is something we struggle with. We're not sure if we're doing it right. I will say that we have 2 calls now from the State Department of the United States. One was, we have somebody applying for a job at the FBI, no, at the State Department, who claims they took your course on national security. It's a very popular course. It's very rigorous. And this person has security with the school that your university collaborates with, which is the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and it is a very difficult, very popular course. And the only thing we can tell this potential employer is all we know is somebody with this email said they were this person and they took this course. That was before we had ID verified certificates. Even if it had been afterwards, we followed the guidelines of the university. We do not share student data. Then about a month ago, for the contracts course, we had an FBI agent come to visit at Harvard X, and the course producer was requested. This person, the FBI man, told us he was coming, and he wanted to sit with the course producer and learn more about the student and ask questions. And so there was only so much we knew, and even if we knew more, we wouldn't have been able to say, but it was a very, not very rigorous list of questions. Does this person seem like they're a patriot? And questions like these. And so when they were done, most of our answers were, I don't know, or no. And so our course producer, who's very funny, he said, does anybody ever answer yes to any of these? And the guy said, no. Yes, other questions? Now, as a reminder, once we're done with our MOOC course, we've done it maybe 12 times, but we want to do it more. We then give it to our Department of Continuing Education, which is a division of Harvard that people do not have to apply like they do to Harvard University. There are some degree, but we give the courses there and they enhance the courses, and those people that take the courses through that department can get academic credit. And they're paying a larger tuition, but the courses are very small compared to 10,000 of your closest friends. They may be between 60 and 100 people. You get high touch, which means you get much more interaction with the teaching fellows and sometimes the faculty. But you pay for it and you can get credit. Harvard X will never be an academic department issuing credit. There are too many places at Harvard that already do that. There'd be no reason for us to recreate what it takes to do that. Registrar, a whole infrastructure. That's not what we do at Harvard X. So we ended yesterday, we're talking about the red line on your rainbow chart. I think I might have mentioned the line of pre-production. It's part of the production process. I think fun starts. You start working content, you start writing your learning objectives, you start planning your assessments, you start making media. Also a reminder, this is vertical red line, which again, we have actually never achieved, but we highly recommend that you stop designing, lock your design, and begin to make, of course, assets, begin to write the content. And so you want to finish before you can continue making your media assets. Stay on paper as long as you can, because the more organized you are, the more planning you do, the more cost-effective and time-effective your production process when you go digital will be. We strive, well, let's say I strived for them to get to that line, but somehow they keep creating. I thought of another tip. We were talking yesterday. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. I suggested that you might, as faculty, recruit some of your own graduate students to be active participants from the beginning. Because, and you pay them, or you can credit, we have examples where we do one or the other. In one example, we both. We just separate what credit would be learning how to learning objectives, learning how to write goals, learning how to write and design assessments to support those goals and objectives, because they are the faculty of tomorrow. This is an example. I'll keep coming back to a very important need to be organized with project management. We have teams that range from 6 to 8 people to 20 people or more. Now, how many in here are faculty? Right? How many of those that raise their hand think yourselves incredibly organized and experts at project management? You know what everything is. You know your deadlines. We've got one hand, very courageous soul. Sorry?
The exception that confirms the rule.
The exception that confirms the rule.
I teach that subject.
It's operations programming, I'm sorry.
Teaches the subject. Okay. Well, I often find, and you're looking at somebody that is not that organized, and it's okay because I never told them I would project manage. I'm more of the manager and the creator, but you don't have time to create a course without having strong project management. And I'm telling you that the faculty really depend on having somebody to help guide us, help give them deadlines and schedules. I mentioned before that we serve the privilege of the faculty. We are faculty driven. The faculty come to us and they want to do a course on ancient writing called paleography. It's the study of ancient handwriting. Not a big market seller, but important to think about. Harvard's very, very dedicated to making sure that humanities continue to live online and on campus. So if we were market driven, there would be many courses that we would not do. Coursera and edX, Coursera in particular, very market driven. edX is becoming driven. And what I mean by that are it's paying attention to courses that help people gain more skills for work skills, accounting, very, very important skills, how to learn hotel management for work. These are very, very important skills, and more online learning are working with these types of courses. It just does not have to be the key priority for Harvard, but it is something that you'll notice if you look at the courses on edX a year ago, this year, or 2 years from now, you'll see that there is a big movement to get the skills to work courses. Incredibly valuable. It's just not what our faculty focuses on. I show you this. At any given time, we have 40 courses in development. Right now, I think we have about 60. And we have to be organized. This is just an example of just a screenshot of part of what we're working on. I don't want you to be able to read it. I'm trying to make the point that when you use things like Google Docs, you could use other applications as well. But this particular course list, we call the course slate. We probably have 40 people from around the university that log on and check this slate, maybe a few times a month. So why do people care? They care because they're in communications. They care because they're a dean. They care because they want to know what's coming in the future. All kinds of reasons. Our edX partners check this every week just to make sure they're aware of what we're working on. So the more organized and the more you can facilitate sharing information in a very structured way, the more you are able to be efficient. So my consejo, at the risk of repeating myself, It is imperative, we've done this, for developers to have a very strong project management set of skills, or you need to have a team member who plays this role, and they must have it. It's very challenging to have a graduate student working with the team, and in their real life, they are reporting to their faculty, and they depend on their faculty in order to get a degree. They don't necessarily make the best project managers because never in their life have they ever heard faculty no. So you need to have authority. And so oftentimes, of course, producers will come to me with a problem, and they, even at the level of their particular professional job, to be project management, it's still very challenging to tell a Nobel laureate, I'm sorry, we're not going to do that. So sometimes, most of the time, we take a lesson from our contracts course and we negotiate. So detailed project management keeps timelines, deadlines, and communication clear for all the team members. Say it again, please.
Do to deliver the results.
Yes. If you don't give people deadlines, they have an experience of delivering. When you give them deadlines, they decide that it doesn't mean much, but at least you can show them what you asked. Questions so far? Suggestions maybe? The microphone? Yes. How big they go? Each or easy. Just. I feel like I'm going in and out of sound. The question is, how difficult is it to engage the faculty? Many schools that come to talk to us ask us, why is it that Harvard has many faculty waiting for their turn to work with us? I think that is a number of reasons. It's not easy to get the kind of support when you don't have a grants, and maybe your school is not able to afford the support of having your course not only videotaped, also well thought out. Because remember, once they do a MOOC with us or online, many faculty then use that content back in their classroom to flip their classroom, to have a blended learning experience where they didn't have this type of media or technology before working with us. So that's one of the reasons faculty like working with us. We've had experiences where faculty simply didn't want to be left behind. And I think the most important thing to have when you're building a big group environment is to have a faculty member who is very outgoing, an evangelist, right? So I could go around, and I have gone to different departments. I'll see if there's staff meetings per invitation, and I'll get faculty excited. But as many of you may relate to, it's always nice to hear directly from your colleagues, faculty talking to the faculty. So we have support from the very highest of the university, President Drew Faust, and also we have a faculty member who is our faculty director, that it's very hard to leave a conversation with him and not be incredibly excited about working with Harvard X. He's that intoxicating. He's very intoxicating. Most of our faculty do not get paid to work with us. X never pays for faculty to work with us, but sometimes, and maybe more times than I know, because I wouldn't know unless the faculty told me. They may, of course, leave from their schools. Many faculty, I think by now I have at least 8 faculty members that are 75 years old and above. They would like to leave UBC. They're really proud of their life. So in a particular case, we do that. The only problem we have are having to ask faculty to wait until we have capacity. But I will say, I think we're fairly unique in that because a lot of people ask us that question. Other questions? Yes, please.
Just a curiosity, in terms of your organization, the organization chart of Harvard, in what place is located your department? Or what's your dependent in terms of your organization operation?
Where you've heard a little bit about how vast Vertex is. We have all these faculty, we have 11 or 12 schools. We're all Cambridge partners. So we call that, I think we talked about it a little bit yesterday, we have an initiative, again, under the leadership of Faust, she's amazing, by the way, that she developed One Harvard, and so she wants to break down the silos. So when Harvard X was first envisioned, many departments said, oh, put it under our school, put it under our department, we know how to do this. And of course, first in line was my alma mater, the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And the president was very savvy. She said, how about if I put it under my department? Because that way, everybody at the university could participate equally. So it is under the central administration. I believe that we would not have as diverse of a set of resources if we were anywhere else other than the central administration. Not to mention the point that that department has some discretionary funds that but I cannot emphasize enough that universities where it comes from the very top, the president of Yale, the past president of Yale, he actually helped create this whole online platform and had many faculty become involved, and he is now the president of Coursera. Before we get into some of the hard work, are there other questions? Yes, please.
Thank you. Just to ask a few questions. Now I have another one, please. This one is the calls that course developers make normally when they are trying to design a course, a MOOC, exactly.
What are some of our mistakes or
Yeah,
lessons
sure, the common
learned?
mistakes.
Let's see, how many days do we have? We make mistakes every single day. And I think I spoke to a few of you yesterday that I would like us to make more mistakes because how much do you learn from something that succeeds unless you do an evaluation, you really think about what made it succeed. But how great is it in the Silicon Valley culture? Failure is seen as a great success because we can learn from our mistakes. So one of the reasons that we support up to 3 versions of the course is we do things wrong in the first course, and how do we know? We know because we look at the data. The assessments were too difficult. We had a factual error. That one is horrifying. And you know what's really horrifying? When the fact find the error. Because I'm looking at 60 courses at any given time. They're looking at one and it's their own. So those type of mistakes we learn a lot from that, not the lessons that we like. So what are some of the pitfalls or some of the, what are some of the lessons learned from a course developer? A lot of it has to do with planning, not leaving enough time for, if you want to launch a course, you try to advertise up to 3 months before launch that we will be launching a course because we don't want the secreto, we want the world to know. And there are times, actually more times than not, we are still creating the course after launch because we didn't go to that vertical red line in the course design. So a lack of planning is one of our biggest issues that we have. The lack of constraining ideas, because the more you work on the course and the more people teach the course, they say, well, what about this? And what about that? And if you do not have very strong, definitive, detailed goals and objectives, it's very easy to continue to design and not be following your own structure. I will say that we have many courses that not have transparent objectives, transparent goals, what you will learn, what we would hope the student be able to do by the time they take the course. Can you hear me okay? Because I feel like I'm coming in and out. Let's say this. Yes. Okay, so I think planning is by far the biggest issue we have. The other issue is faculty. You know, you folks just don't do your homework. So we give assignments, and then it's going to happen and going to happen. And it's very obvious that's because you have a very difficult plate. So one of the things that we try to do up front, and we are not always successful, is what are your commitments in the next year? Are you going to go on sabbatical? We've had situations where the faculty said, I forgot to tell you, I'm going on sabbatical in September. But the thing I get a lot is, no, I'm going on a sabbatical. I'll have a lot more time. I promise you, out of maybe 3 dozen faculty that have told me, I'm going to do this. When faculty go on sabbatical, and I'm not naming any of your names, but you want to be doing things that you're supposed to be doing when you're on campus. So I think a big one is time. I think making something really needed, because remember they're one click away from Facebook. So less is more. And I could literally go on and on about all the mistakes we make every single day. So I'll think of some more. Other questions before we go to backward design? And Jose, remind me, ¿cómo se dice backward design en español?
Diseño inverso. Diseño a la inversa.
Everybody get that?
Diseño revertido también es otra opción. Diseño a la inversa.
It's hard enough for me to explain. It's hard for me to explain it even in English. So by the way, I've taken what I'm about to show, I've taken it from Understanding by Design. This is actually 1998, and it's Wiggins and Nicky. So, backward design, we have a lot of interest when faculty come and they see, well, my colleague in my department, they used this tool and they did something really fantastic using this animation. And we say, well, we can certainly talk about that. What is it you're trying to solve? And a big mistake, I think from my colleague here, a big mistake we often make is a tool in search of a problem, right? So we try to say, what should students know or be able to do by the end of your course lessons and assignments? Your learning objectives, your learning goals and objectives. How do you know if your students understand? What will you and your students do to achieve your objectives? And what will you and your students do to together? What is the supporting media and technical tools that will support your core goals and objectives? Many of you teach, in fact, all of the other faculty probably teach more than a couple of courses. So we have faculty that are talking about their course, and then they'll say, well, I want to do this. And we'll say, well, where does that fit into your curriculum? Oh, for this course it doesn't, but I need it for another course. We'll say, okay, we're gonna leave that for the other course. So why are learning objectives important? And here I want to give credit to Dr. Doris R. Bruder, from MIT. Her book on learning objectives is incredibly useful. Again, I don't necessarily have to buy the book. There are many articles, presentations, and notes and reactions to Professor Bruder's learning objectives. So she's just one of the people that we turn to in terms of who's helped guide us. And by the way, we're all learning this and well, so make me smarter so I can go back and tell my folks, well, I learned. Then they'll tell me everything is wrong with it, but that's okay. So the importance of learning objectives is it provides a focus or instruction. It provides guidelines for the student learning. It helps define and provide targets for assessments. Do you know what I mean when I say assessments? So a lot of times in the classroom, you will have assessments purely by working with the students face to face. You'll have midterm exams, you'll have essays, you'll have capstone projects. There are any number of things you do in your classroom, typically, especially when the classrooms are smaller in student size. Online, we're going to do an activity in a moment. Online, when you have over 1,000 students or even 500, we have tens of thousands in some courses. We have one course, CS50, and I don't produce that. I don't manage the group that produces that course. It's completely its own operation. They take up an entire floor in our building, and it's CS50, and they have their own platform. CS50, I highly recommend it. It is hard, and they are just an example of being very interesting and innovative approach into assessments. But the real point I want to make is they average 350,000 students every time they open that course. It's a self-paced course that you do over 2 months. It became popular that Yale University now uses it for their own teaching, their own online teaching. The other thing I like about the CS50.org model, and that could be very interesting for a place like Bolivia, there's a group, a nonprofit group called Launch Code, LAUCHCODE. Dime? Okay, Launch Code. Ayúdame, por favor. The reason this is a very important, I think, for what you consider is CS50 is now being used by launchcore.org. It's a company that do startups. They do a startup in technology, for example. They're very, very successful. They have a startup in St. Louis, a city in the United States that has many corporations, maybe over 100 major corporations, and it is a population that has challenges because the educational system there is very under-resourced. When they went to make their recent startup, which was about 2 years ago, they could not find in their community software developers that were qualified to work for their startup. So they moved their operation from Foursquare over to Silicon Valley. It's San Francisco, actually, and they were so sad that their own hometown did not have the workforce skills to work in their company. They started a startup launch code, and they look for a course. How they help their community, people that had been laid off, people that had made a career out of doing jobs that did not necessarily require skills. And they put the net out and they asked the corporations if we do students that pass, successfully pass CS50.org from Harvard, if they pass and then they come to us for I think it's 6 weeks, and they learn the soft skills. How do you dress in a professional environment? The importance of being on time. How do you act? Would you consider taking these people as interns in a paid job in your corporation? He's also he's an evangelist himself, very, very inspiring. He has 99 CEOs in St. Louis area, and 99 said yes. So, Nacho became so successful, they placed these students in the corporations for $15 an hour, which, if you know the rate of software developers in the United States, that's $30,000. They probably average $180,000. But $30,000 is a lot. Well, it's a lot. It's a lot. But if you've been making your living, you're a single mom, you're trying to make ends meet, you're a waitress during the night, by day you're delivering pizza. Instead, you can become involved in these corporations, and after a 1 or 2 year of this paid internship, people succeed, and the success rate is very, very high. And they are positioned in the corporation when they first get there. And they have a buddy within those skills between learning the CS50 and learning soft skills. It has launched many careers, and they have people anywhere from 14 years old to 65 years old, people with disabilities, people of all races. It became so successful now, they've now started it up in Miami. It's a wonderful model. Why did I get off on that? I do not know. Okay, assessments. I did it because when you're online, you have 300,000 students, or in our case anywhere from 55,000 to 80,000. You can't easily grade, actually, you cannot grade essays. So our assessments are primarily machine graded. They are multiple choice. They are drag and drop. They are many types of math type assessments graded by machine. Recently, we've started getting involved in peer grading, and I'll show you a little short clip about that. But when you're working on online MOOCs, you need to think about how you do your assessments in the classroom and how that can convert online when you're not face-to-face and you're using a large volume of students. Why else are learning objectives important? It communicates expectations for the learners. The learners going in, if they understand what will be expected of them to know, they may make some decisions on whether that is right for them and whether they are up to the challenge. But it is transparency. Clear, well-written learning objectives also helps to convey instructional intent for others. And they provide for evaluation for instruction. Actividad. Who's ready? Okay. So, I'm assuming I got cards, but I'm assuming people have their writing pencils and paper. So I would like to take the next 10 minutes and invite you to, you know what, I am doing faculty homework. It's so great. You know how you bring an apple. So I'm inviting you to do a hands-on exercise to, one, write, and you can blame Professor Bear because I stole it directly from her. 5 learning objectives for a course you teach include skills as well as concepts. Identify the skills or behavior of each learning objective. How would you assess or measure the student being objective in your classroom? And then I invite you to discuss it with a few people next to you. Now, if we were to do a whole semester course, it's deeply involved into the science of writing learning objectives and the science of writing assessments. For example, we have a professor at Harvard that comes about twice a year and teaches us how to write effective multiple choice, for example. So since I can't cover, I'm not even the best person to cover, but since I can't cover the science of writing learning objectives, think about active verbs. Think about objectives that are measurable. If you have an objective to learn about MOOCs, we had some objectives early on in yesterday's workshop that we're going to learn the phases of production processes of a MOOC. We're going to learn some tips from real world. Think about in one of the courses that you do in your life, what kind of learning objectives might you write? And if there are further questions, I'm going to give you some feedback. Okay? Take another 1 minute and maybe talk to your neighbors. We'll take all the time.
Claro, que está las 20 gigas y el disco está. Ah, sí, Sony se va a meter. Sí, una partida. El otro hasta en 700.
Acreditar-se não sabia como sacar-me para não ser aí eu não me vi que se fizesse
We are at break time, so I invite you to continue having your conversation, but also feel very comfortable to go out and take a break. We'll break for maybe 29 minutes. And then when we come back, you be the teacher. It's like how to fit. The student teaches teacher and the teacher teaches students. How many have read the Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of Press? Yes. Paulo Freire. Yes. If you have a chance to read the press, I highly recommend it. Paulo wrote it, I think, maybe in the 80s, I think. But if you only read a little bit, read the first 2 chapters. It's absolutely fascinating. So we're going to take a point from Paulo, and we're going to have, when we come back, a student teacher. Okay, thank you. making sure she recruits from everywhere on TV to Georgia Tech, and she recruits
normalmente se habla, recurrimos a sistemas de evaluación que usamos en el. Ese entorno virtual, ese entorno de una pedagogía exige una metodología más ágil, pero además que sea parte integral del conocimiento, no la parte fundamental, como entendemos en procesos académicos regulares. Y uno en el diseño de MOOC o de un curso con pedagogía digital tiene tendencias de repetir lo que hacemos normalmente en el aula en términos de evaluación y lleva mucho tiempo. Entonces recurrimos al cuestionario, etc. En ese sentido es importante diferenciar el rol de la evaluación de contenido, de conocimiento, en estos procesos educativos. Varía la evaluación. En esa experiencia, algunos eran complejos por el tiempo que lleva la gestión. Con pocos alumnos incorporé video, que su canal de video también puedan comentar y responder, no básicamente responder a un cuestionario, sino comentar el conocimiento desarrollado. También funciona el blog. Es una respuesta colectiva frente a otro blog. Además, más documentales. Y lo que más me funcionó es el monograma, es decir, normalmente hacemos monografías, pero el monograma era una descripción de 3 páginas con títulos multimedia que el alumno pueda desarrollar y pueda responder a los puntos de interés que quisiera profundizar. Lo interesante era que en el blog los compañeros, el conjunto, el colectivo de estudiantes, también iba respondiendo. Entonces, la evaluación en los MOOCs es un proceso político, no es solamente docente entre los alumnos, sino también es una acción corporativa sobre la verificación de esas respuestas. Entonces, lo que quiero plantear es que el modelo que se dice de evaluación dentro del sistema de diseño de un MOOC exige mucha creatividad, ¿no? Exige además que sea un proceso compartido, etc. Entonces, es más un comentario diría. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Could you, there's one example that I can show you quite quickly. So I mentioned that with MOOCs, because there are so many people, we need to have machine-graded types of assessments. But there is something that we've been experimenting with. Now, I'm not the best person to explain all the ways, but let me show you a short video that may give you some ideas. And the topic of this type of assessment is called peer assessment. So when you have more students online, possibly do a grade for, one way to handle that could be that you have many teaching fellows. So remember, we had 3 phases of development. We had 3 phases of production of a MOOC. We had development, delivery, and archiving. So during development, content creators are often the teaching assistants to the faculty. So they do content with the faculty because they know their subject. In the delivery part of the 3 phases of making, those content developers often then become the teaching fellows or the teaching assistants in the delivery phase of the course. So we have had, mostly we have between 2 to 5 teaching fellows or teaching assistants in the MOOC during delivery. They're taking questions in discussion forums, they're answering content questions. And depending on how big your MOOC is, the biggest MOOC we had where we needed, there were only 500 students. It was a SPOC, a small private online course. there were 500 students, and we actually had 19 teaching fellows because of very similar complications that this gentleman just discussed. So in that way, we had more people to support, but enough, right? So we're starting to play with or experiment with peer assessment. Peer assessment is not easy to design, but it's not impossible. And you take a rubric and you want to normalize the grades across the students. So it takes a lot of training of the teaching fellows. So you have a rubric of how you would grade a peer entry. So maybe it's an essay, maybe it's a essay answer to a complex question. And then you as the faculty, you create 1, 2, maybe 3 examples of what are essays that would be particularly appropriate to answer this complex problem. So you give examples. And students only get their grade, they only get their essays assessed by their peers once they have assessed peers. So it depends on your design. Maybe you say you have to give feedback to 2 other peers before the peers will give feedback to you. It just depends on your design. And so you have this framework for what you're looking for. That's a very crude way to describe, but maybe this short video will do more justice. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, I said we do 3 versions of each course. By the time we do the second version, we often recruit volunteer community teaching assistants from version 1. They have to have completed the course, and they have to complete it with a high enough passing grade. And then they can volunteer to be community teaching fellows in the community as well. Let's go to an example of peer assessment, which is now supported on the platform. And of course, Coursera supports it as well. I don't know if it has this. I didn't think I was going to show this. But basically, it's called Open Response Assessment, where you have a form to fill out, and you talk about the explanation, you talk about what level do you want mastery, do you want competency-based, and see if you can follow along. And I have to preface with, this is not my core expertise, and we've only started using this quite recently. So prompts, there are scored responses. There are a number of points to get depending on how much your essay refers to. Maybe your essay only addresses 1 or 2 points, you get less score. And then you answer, you can put yours in and then grade other people's based on the rubric, which we call a rubric for a framework of how to make sure the grading is consistent across. I don't think I gave a very good explanation, but what one to think about is look at the general category of peer assessment. It does take a lot more effort in planning your curriculum design, but it also allows your students to also be active learners. Everybody wants to be. We do get, not that many, but we do get back, I graded too hard and that type of thing. And sometimes our group is not offering as many variables as we may want. So, an example that is not machine graded, but yet not the responsibility of the faculty and the assistants other than to create a design that will support and facilitate success. I hope that is useful in the exam. Other, maybe two more. Yes, did you do the exercise? How did you do? I pick on those others.
Bueno, yo enseño la materia que se llama es una materia del primer semestre, entonces está enfocada en tratar de que los chicos empiecen a pensar suficientemente y a crear inputs y a poder construir conceptos para el final del semestre, construir conceptos para diseño, conceptos que se puedan traducir en objetos visuales. Entonces, para mis objetivos, una es práctica de obras de arte, piezas musicales, películas, les hago ver películas, canciones, les voy a pedir que ellos extraigan el concepto de su creatividad. No hay nada bien, no hay nada malo, pero ellos tienen que empezar a explorar esto para ver cómo se construye conceptos que después puedan hablar por sí mismos. Y la segunda parte ya es construir conceptos en base a una técnica que se llama MOOCs, una palabra que es pequeñita, con un montón de imágenes que se relacionan al concepto que quieren expresar. Y a partir de eso ellos sintetizan un concepto. Entonces, primero el proceso inverso y después ellos. Entonces, ¿cómo relacionarlo con los MOOCs? Mientras hablaba el caballero y usted le respondía, empecé a pensar que el tema de los pares es bien importante. Pero ¿cómo es que los pares tengan el criterio suficiente para guiar estos procesos? Que yo lo llevo personalmente con mi alumnos, que es me parece muy difícil de volver a algo a través de la. Entonces, estaba planteando preguntas, algún tipo de formulario, que las apreciaciones de los pares puedan ir ayudando a que cada uno construya un concepto. Por ejemplo,
Yes, hard. Any comments from those of you that have been listening to his? Yes, please. Or better put it, like.
Disculpen, español más bueno. Ahí está. Yo enseño materia electronológica. Esa área de electronológica. Objetivos. Así. Dos objetivos generales y su forma de hablar.
Perdóneme, por favor. I would like to hear your comments. My for you is related to his dilemma, or this is a new dilemma? It's a new one.
No, yo quisiera comentar dos objetivos y su forma de evaluar. Disculpen, no va a alcanzar. Tenía solo tenía una pregunta al señor anterior. ¿Cómo podría dirigir los objetivos? Objetivo, no puedes controlar ni verdad. Si pides objetivo, no puedes desarrollar. Eso era mi duda de la anterior participación. Gracias.
Ah, then later perhaps we hear about your. Y amigo, repite por favor tu uno de tus. No el problema, pues exactamente el objeto que escribiendo.
El objetivo sería crear subjetivamente obras musicales o ciencias. Básicamente, crítica de arte.
Tengo idea para ti. Now I'm about to show you, very new. It's never been done to my knowledge. I'm probably going to fumble in showing it to you, but it's a way to annotate. We have a tool that we've created to annotate visuals. We can annotate text, we can annotate photographs. That we've been doing for maybe a year. But 2 or 3 weeks ago, one of our technologists came and said, you know, Annie, I've been working on annotating video. And I knew he was working on it, but I was not sure how he would make this happen. So let me try, patient with me, let me try to show you. But I think part of your question is, how do we promote visual literacy and set a ground level, have a basic understanding of how to critique in so if you could use a tool, an annotation tool, perhaps this one I'm going to show is video, but if I can call one just the image, because we've been doing that with 100-foot scrolls, for example. Let me see if this works. The idea is that the instructor puts in his or her annotations, and then the assignment is for learners to put their annotations into the image itself. And then other students can make on other annotations. And faculty can also make comments on students' annotations. And then when you start having this collective amount of annotations, then you bring that into a discussion forum, and then you talk about what works, what doesn't, and you challenge each other in a very collegial way. So fingers crossed that it works. It only works online, and it only works when people have a clue, which I do not. But I will try. Okay, I'm going to log into our experimental edX platform. I'm going to view the experimental approach. And here we have, hopefully, we have an example. Oh, let's see, it's hard to see, isn't it? There. So here we have an example of images from the China X. We'll see how fast your internet access is now. Let us go to an image annotation instead. Okay. might not be coming up. But what you may not be able to see, see if this pulls up. But here we have users, text, and we have an image here that is a very, maybe 100-foot long in real life Chinese scroll. So, okay. So, when I first look at it, maybe 100,000 pixels long. And the way the technology works is we have scanned this image. Remember the clip yesterday where they were preserving and conserving? Well, they've been hand those things. Remember, if we unload scroll, we don't know. Maybe it's from the 500 era. We don't know if it's going to survive. So people with extreme expertise, and often chemists, they roll this out and they make sure that it stays intact. They make sure that it is preserved and conserved, and then they digitize it for us. And then the system we created is called Mirador. Mirador is an open source technology. I invite you to look at Mirador. And it is a collaboration between Harvard and Stanford University in California. But many universities are now collaborating because it's open source. So if you do a Google on Mirador, maybe Mirador Harvard, Mirador Stanford, just Mirador, it's a tool for the humanities. So if you're at the Bodleian in Oxford, and maybe you have a book that is, from 1200. One university may have 3 of the pages. One university may have 5 of the pages. And the idea of having a collective open source is Mirador will bring those pages together so you can see the book as a whole. That particular feature and functionality is being developed now. I would say sometime this year, that collective taking all of these pages together to then present it to you as a book. But right now what you can do is look at each page individually. In this case, what we're going to, and so Mirador is a way to look at pages that you will never be able to see in real life, even if you are at the university, because these images are too valuable to be taken out of the vault in different lights. So we want to bring these types of manuscripts to the world. So in this particular case, it wasn't enough for the people on my team to say, okay, now we look at these images, we want to annotate it. They always want something. Okay, so here I'm going to attempt to annotate this 100-foot long, maybe this one might be 30 feet, but it's bigger than this. It's bigger than this, right? So I'm going to use these tools, and since I am such a novice, you'll be able to see for a learner that doesn't know anything, I'm just one step above. So we're trying to make it very user-friendly. So I'm going to zoom in, and I might zoom in, right? I can keep going because then it was scanned. And then the technology breaks these pieces into small tiles because many reasons. It makes it faster over the internet. But it was also an issue of libraries feeling concerned about their own copyright. And if you create something this big in small sections, even something small in small sections, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to download this as a whole and then use it without permission. Okay? So there are many problems we are trying to solve, and I just want to remind you that this is an example of when you work with technology and the librarians together with the faculty and the humanities. Okay? So now I have zoomed in, and I want to, instructor can add their comments. Let's see. I'm not good at this. But be able to come in and write things on this particular, let's see. Sorry. It's that. Okay. So let's say I want to come in here and say, this is an example. Maybe the question is, in 1400s, it's probably a dumb question, but in 1400s, what is a very common household pet? And can you fit in your so it's very, very challenging to do this, if not impossible, if you are blind. And that's one of the things we're working on with our accessibility team, is how to do this if you're blind. And I thought it was impossible, and we are making paso by paso, step by step, to try to solve that problem. But putting that aside, for people with sight, this is very driven by what we would call visual pedagogy. So I can come in and say, this is an example of a household pet in 1480. I would save it, and now it saves mine over here, right? The faculty can already, they can load their own. Go over to our pencil. Faculty can say, here is a household pet. Now, it's difficult to see, but if you go into China X in our platform, you'll be able to see many examples of using this type of implementation tool. So we don't take too much time. This may be an example of how you can develop critical thinking skills by actually annotating the areas of an image. We're doing this now with video for what we would call temporal. So we can, it will probably debut first in September. And so it was very difficult for us to, and in fact, this is how I met Veronica and Gonzalo. Veronica and Gonzalo, they came to visit me at Harvard X. Dan Levy, Professor Levy sent them to me, but I didn't know they were coming at a time. And so I said, okay, I go to this. I said, okay, but you have to shadow me. You just come to every I go to, you go to. So it was that day that one of our developers, he's originally from El Salvador, and he demonstrated to all of the librarians this new annotation tool. And you could hear it's also, it's hard to see, but right here, you can also tag the content. And there's a search, and you can say, find everything, find every household pet. All the users identified. There's a funny story. We use this for our course on visualizing Japan, teaching history, as I mentioned, through visuals. And so one of the assignments was to flag everything that related to a particular concept. But that was an example. Who asked us when we messed something up? Okay. So that was an example. Many of the annotations were annotating every time they saw una bandera. But we meant flag it, like pay attention to it. And so that's an example when you're teaching world, you really need to pay attention to your language. But just to give you an idea that you can zoom in and out and share your annotations. Does that make sense? So this might be a tool, a technology tool, that allows people to do more humanities. When I looked at this tool, one of my first projects when I was very young was a CD. A few of you remember what a CD is? A lot of you remember what a CD is, right? And so my CD, it was with my Harvard graduate school, and it was a course on radiology. And I remember going in and I was working with the Massachusetts General Hospital. So my job was to take the radiology scans that came in from Israel as locally. Time frame was just different enough that they would send from Israel. They would send these high resolution scans for a second opinion, for example. So my job was to take these scans and make a workflow so we could cut them up and automatically make them available to the doctors. So I was working on the images, and the doctor came in and said, what an excellent job I was doing. And you realize this story is not going to end well, right? what an excellent job I was doing. I was so proud. And he said, this technology is great. I'm still proud. And he said, you have fixed a stress fracture. Well, I had gone into Photoshop. I thought it was dust. And I'm cleaning, I'm cleaning up the x-rays. Meanwhile, I have fixed a stress fracture in somebody's leg. And so when I saw this annotation tool used for humanities, all I could think of was, we need that for radiology. So one of the things we just launched, maybe 3 weeks ago, you saw yesterday the paper cut for the cell biology course on mitochondria. If I was really a hard instructor, I would have asked you to tell me what course you had seen with the paper cut, but I won't do that. Okay, so one thing I could see. I'm going to go back into my dashboard, and I'm going to sample course. I think Dan may have showed you some of this last week. So we thought, what can we do with this tool for the sciences? So we transformed this otherwise humanities tool into a cell explorer, which, by the way, you can annotate. Oh, it's too bad it's so dark. This is very left. Is there anything we can do on the screen for this? It's a very, very colorful graphic of a cell. Now let's see. Okay. So anyway, they're very high resolution images that we can zoom to and zoom right to a part of the cell. And actually, tarea para hoy is go to the edX platform and sign up for Cell X mitochondria. And in mitochondria, you can click on a tool in the upper part, the tab, there are tabs across the top, and pick Cell Explorer. And you go explore this very rich of a cell, and then you get the annotation tool to annotate what you've been looking at. So I digress, but it's too bad because here it's a little bit easier to see. Right? So I can't turn this around to show you because we're taped down. But think about tools. Maybe we can have some lights here, please. But think about tools that can do what your colleague is asking about. How do you create critical thinking of visuals? Go to a museum. If anybody's ever gone to a museum with somebody that is blind, who is blind, it's a wonderful experience because people that are not able to see the images, and people that even can see the images, often wear headphones to have the images explained to you. Well, when you're forced to use that, it creates a much richer experience. And a friend of ours was telling us that when she goes, her friends love to go to the museum with her because they can see so much more deeply because she's explaining to them what they're seeing as well. So think about turning these challenges into opportunities. And in this particular case, look at the mirror tool, annotation tool, and being able to annotate video. It's very, very cutting edge. It's so cutting edge that it's difficult for me to show you because I'm just letting it go. I hope that's good. Now, does anybody else want to give one of their examples? My colleague from the back? La señora, would you like to talk about one of your learning objectives? Your course? It's okay, no?
Gracias. Gracias por mi micrófono. Gracias, gracias. Muchas gracias. Rebobinamos un poquito la película y cuando das nos han dado tarea de hacer objetivos, formular objetivos. Perdón, ahora sí. Formular objetivos y dar unas formas de evaluarlos concretamente. Tienen dos. Primero, enseñar a los estudiantes el concepto y particularidades del semiconductor. ¿Cómo evaluar? Los semiconductores físicos con diferentes materiales de retícula y impureza. Usar tabla periódica. Los estudiantes dibujaron las imágenes de átomos con impurezas diferentes, jugando, porque existen casi pocas realmente físicamente existen, pero jugando con eso podemos crear otros semiconductores con otras propiedades físicas. Segundo objeto, entonces si mis estudiantes podían dibujar las imágenes de átomos con impurezas, entonces han comprendido. Segundo objetivo, aprender aplicaciones de los dispositivos semiconductores, como diodos, transistores, bipolares y FET. ¿Cómo evaluar? Demostrar funcionando los circuitos rectificador y amplificador en protocolo. Eso sería palpable si lo que han escuchado podrían plasmar en práctica. Y esos casos se han dado, mis estudiantes han hecho ese ejercicio. Pues,
Okay. Next example. I think you would love to read about Karen Wilcox from MIT. What was the word for deep scientist? What was it when? It's a very difficult problem because I don't know your subject at all. But I would like to suggest, well, first of all, before I suggest something, does anybody have any advice for your colleague here? Yes, please. Un momento.
We should check the copyrights for some simulations and videos showing this movement of electrons in semiconductor devices, as well as simulations of some of the circuits that the professor mentioned before. Then probably to introduce simulations and video on demand lectures would help her.
Thank you for that. That's really helpful for me. The very first MOOC and it's not exactly our field, but the very first MOOC on edX was from Anant Arwal. Anant is the CEO of edX. He's the founder of edX. He's an MIT professor that teaches electronics, and that was the first MOOC ever made. Very popular. It might be useful for you to log into edX and see how he did certain similar things with simulations and such. And I'm so out of my depth, I don't want to stand pretend. But as your colleague said, there are a few existing simulations, and also there are a lot of simulations that people make as open source, especially in the area of science, because in my experience with the science professors that I work with, they tend to share making very open source. So you might want to look at, I think it's called Circuits in Electronics on the edX platform by Professor Anant Arwal. If you just do Google for Circuits, Anant, that's his first name, A-N-A-N-T in edX. Oh, that's not digital. I know, right? Also, I think we should have a consejo. Keep it simple. That's brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Look, I don't even know how to use it. Pretty close. It's called Circuits. I would also do a search just with Google for Coursera and edX with your topic, and I am extremely confident you will find something on this subject. In fact, I think, without knowing anything, I think that you will find many possibilities because people in your field and people in Anand's field tend to migrate to digital more easily. So I'm not sure what slide's coming next, but we'll see together. So a lot of what we're talking about, well, actually, I want to cover one second. And if we had time, as in quite a few days, maybe a whole semester course, on writing effective learning objectives, you would learn about using, let me get my chalk. One thing to look up, Bloom's taxonomy, for example, is one of the foundational concepts of working with learning objectives, backwards design, making sure you're using very active verbs that are measurable, because it's one thing to say, I want to learn about, I want students to learn about X. The more specific you can be, the more measurable you can be, and the more it will help your students understand what you're trying to have them be able to do, think, or know by the end of your course. So these are, this is one set of taxonomies that have, in fact, the resource list that I put up has some references learning more about how to write effective objectives, because it's not necessarily intuitive. It may not necessarily be how you're running your courses now. So it's a combination of learning some of the specific, what I would call science of education. For many years, people didn't think there was a science education. What's the big deal? You get up and you teach. Well, with breakthrough, and this is, like I said, it's probably 30 years old by now. Through Bloom's taxonomy, for example, we put the resource list back up that when you look at some of these websites, and there's a lot in Spanish, it will really break down the whole process of defining your learning objectives and how we'll measure the outcomes through assessment. And it's all part of the red line. If you spend a lot of time on the Rainbow document in red line, I agree that you will be much more effective. This is where the course design really happens. How do you define what you want people to learn? How do you display it? How do you communicate it? How do you measure it? And so, if people get a picture of the resources, shall I go back to it? Writing measurable outcomes, guidelines for learning objectives. The other person I would like to highlight, who is very well known, the woman that I mentioned, Professor Doris Boulet. I'm probably saying her name wrong. MIT. So there are so many. There are hundreds and hundreds of resources. These just happen to be 4 that I thought might be useful, and that will really break down the process of doing effective, well-written learning objectives. And my colleague Pablo, from what I understand, this is what you were challenged with doing 5 iterations of your MOOC. I understand that correctly.
Actually, I was challenged to do. Actually, I was challenged to do this in a course that we had for professors here. It's called Design of the Design of a Course. Actually, and we had to put all those points together. It wasn't thinking about a mock. Yes, we needed to put specifically what was going to the course by targeting what we want as an outcome. So we started by the outcome and we went backwards.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. And one of the things there are a lot is what I've also heard here today. Yes, 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 I understand that we need these very particular learning objectives. I get that. But in my course, that's not going to work because many reasons, what the reality is, I'm very confident that breaking things down into granular bits of your curriculum, you can indeed take the subjectivity out of it by being very clear in your expectations of the learning. These are some of the resources that may allow you to background knowledge. This one in particular I find very interesting on background design. It's in English and Spanish. I've given the URL for the Spanish version, and hopefully that will help. I would like to go to just a few more examples. So we often ask faculty to think about, how do you assess your student in the classroom? I've had more faculty than I like to admit annually. I don't want to do assessments in my course. I don't believe in tests. I don't want to track and have the students have to track their progress. It particularly came up in the very first course we did in the poetry series. And it was one of the very first books that we did. And we did a pilot test first. And so when we brought the data and the feedback to the faculty, because there's nothing better than to bring the real life data and the user responses to faculty for how to listen. In that particular case, the most overwhelming criticism of that short course on early American poetry was, how come there are no tests? How come there are no assessments? How can I track my progress? So with the best of intention, the faculty wanted it to be an exploratory course. Learners didn't want that. They wanted to know how well they were doing. They wanted to be measured. They wanted to compete with themselves in many cases. So you may have theories and thoughts about how you want to teach, but I still want to call out that it's less about what you want to teach, and it's more about what you want your students to learn. Putting the learner at the center of your instructional design will probably end up being more satisfaction for you as the faculty, and definitely more satisfaction for the learner, because it's a very human trait to want to know how you're doing. And that's one way that people can follow along. Another example I want to give back to your example of critical thinking. Remember that there are ways to have people upload their content. So perhaps you want to give an assignment and say, think this problem out. It's a storyboard, or in your case, you said it's a series of images, I think, right? And put them in order. Remember, or this is at least how sometimes we do in our MOOCs. Because we can't possibly grade as many people, sometimes we give activities that is really for the benefit of the learner, and it's not a contradiction to the learner wants to be assessed. Some of these projects are just for them to be thinking something out. So it's okay to also have activities to challenge, to say, draw these pieces and then upload it, and then maybe you have a drag and drop exercise, which is machine, and then they can drag and drop it in a particular order, and then they can be thinking about it for themselves. When we do exercises that do not have a grade, oftentimes what we do is we encourage the students to go into the discussion forums and discuss their challenges. The teaching fellows can come in with prompts to suggest what were some of your challenges. The students will then post their challenges. Other students will often say, I had that problem too. So the teaching fellows can try to moderate the discussion, but oftentimes the learning is happening among the peers themselves, not necessarily peer reviewed as much as just peer discussed in discussion forums. So a great way to have that engagement is to provoke and say and put prompts to get people focused on a particular problem. So you can do ungraded assignments as well. It may not count for their grade, but it is very valuable. So how might it be the same or different in an online course? You're all very accomplished faculty in your courses. You have your ways of assessing the learning. You may not use the education speak in order to describe it, but you are already doing your assessments. And you probably don't call them assessments, maybe yes, maybe no. So I also like to point out that go with what you know works already and think about how does that then translate to online. So one of the exercises that we often have faculty do is we say, what do we want to accomplish? How do you do it in your classroom? And how might that be translated to online? So just that format of thinking about those approaches. Also, remember you're in a collaborative team, so you do not need to be the expert in all things as people expect faculty to be. So you are the curriculum designer, you are the what. You're working with an instructional designer, they are the how. And so if you can name what you want to accomplish, and you can describe how you do it already, all of you would be able to do that. Your instructional designer is somebody that is much more experienced on the platform of choice, in our case, edX. Remember, there's Open edX you can download and have maybe somebody in the technical group maintain that server. Your instructional designer can help you translate what you do into online learning. Your media team, or even one person, can come in and brainstorm with you what type of media might support that particular curricular objective. Okay? Answers? Answers? Comments? Hello? Comment? Let's see what else we have. We're short for time, but this is an example of an activity you might want to do amongst yourselves in your free time. You all have so much free time, I'm sure. Yeah, right. You have time to read. Thank you for coming. So here's an activity that you might consider doing with yourself and with your colleagues. Think about the questions you have about learning objectives, acting, as opposed to passive learning, and assessment methods. Write each question on a separate note. Share your questions with the people next to you. In Professor Broder from MIT, she has an entire PowerPoint online that discusses some of these activities. I'll move to the next slide unless other people still are taking photos. Yes, Ravi, we'll make it available. And I hope you enjoy the real one because this is all color coordinated and such. I wrote a note to myself, let's see. Okay. I want to show one example of a course, what we call First Nights. It is a course taught at Harvard, uniquely Harvard, in that we only know of a couple of other universities that teach this course, and that's because they were students of Professor Tom Kelly. Tom Kelly is a professor at Harvard for maybe 30 years. He's been teaching First Nights for 20 years. He is a professor of medieval Italian manuscripts, but he's also a professor of teaching classical works of music. He came up, in fact, he tells me that he kind of came up with this idea when he was a graduate student. He came up with this with his professor. First Nights takes 5 classical works of music, maybe Messiah, Beethoven's Ninth, Berlioz, 2 others, where he teaches it from the point of view of what was happening the first night it was ever presented in real life, in 1780, in the 1800s. So I'd like to just show a little bit of a clip in this particular course because it's in 5 parts. They are 5 different works of music, and each course is between 4 to 6 weeks, and you can take one and maybe not others, maybe during the holidays, for example. A lot of people like to go hear the Messiah. And so he did a whole performance on Messiah. So I'll show you a couple of clips. When you watch these clips, I want to point out, this is a consejo that I have not written on the board, but I'll just describe it. Take advantage of what you are already doing and bring in your team to maybe report it. So we often seize on the upper capitalize on the opportunities that the faculty are already doing. So he was doing this great performance on the Messiah with 85 musicians. Many of those people try getting 85 releases to be having these people on camera. Our course producer came back with 83, and I said, great, where's the other 2? Because they're going to be somewhere in that picture. So the other thing about this particular one is we have an orchestra, a student orchestra, the Harvard Radcliffe Orchestra, and we were able to capitalize on the students that were already going to be the musicians in this course. So therefore, also bringing to the forefront more than it has to offer. Now, do you have a music department here?
We don't have it.
So maybe there are other universities that you want to collaborate with. Maybe you want to collaborate with the local community theaters. Now, music is extremely difficult when it comes to copyright. And you'll say, and you told me anything before 1895 is public domain. That might be true for the original composition. What about the modern composition? What about the performers? What about fill in the blank of 5 other reasons why this work of art from hundreds of years ago still has copyright issues? It still has appearance release issues. Yes, yes, it's true. There's no copyright issues here, but we have them in the U.S. Yes, international. Makes it a whole lot of fun. But there are a couple reasons that I'll be calling this out. And on this particular example, I will be reading my notes because our course producer is far more, remember I like to hire people that know a lot more than me? You're about to see an example. Or another example. So, stop this. Okay, this particular course is available online. I invite you all to see. And here, of course. So, we talked about taking large video pieces, 30 minutes, 50 minutes. It don't always have to be a lecture. It could be a performance. What we like to do in this particular case, I think we are able to get these different videos down to about, these are 12 minutes. Not only does it keep the learners more attentive because their attention span is less, but also from a pedagogical point of view, when we split up a video, we call that chunking. Chunking as in breaking it into parts. There are pedagogical reasons for doing that beyond attention span. It allows us to create active viewing. You show a little bit of video, then you do assessments. Show a little bit of video and do assessments. These assessments may or may not be graded, but it creates more active viewing. In this particular example, I'm going to play it from the beginning, but not all 12 minutes. But about just less than 2 minutes in, we'll hear Professor Kelly talk about different courses. Oh, let me use my. Okay. So the learning in this particular exercise is actively to music. The example is, in the types of choruses in Messiah, those choruses are anthem, fugue, and duet. So this segment shows how handle transforms high, original, a duet with quite different lyrics into the well-known duet of Messiah. In each video, Tom describes one of 3 types of choruses in Messiah. Each video contains numerous examples and diagrams. This is followed by what we call a formative assessment questions below the videos. So we have a video, and then below you have questions. In these cases, they are 1 point each in terms of your score. These questions test comprehension of each particular course. All 3 courses have been covered. A small quiz with multiple audio clips asks students to identify the type of chorus they hear. But here's the interesting part. You have students watching the contextual video, and then when we break it down into small audio clips that represent each of the 3 types of chorus. So students become used to, I see video, question, video, question, video, question. The quiz is not formulated in the same way. The quiz asks you questions to see your transfer of knowledge. So it's one thing to be able to watch a video and ask questions, but in this particular exercise, we're asking students to pay attention to questions of a particular video. But the quiz is actually asking, and this is to the point of analytical skills, we want to help students learn not to just regurgitate or be dependent on the video, because we want them to be able to understand that knowledge in such a way that they can transfer it to a quiz that does not have video. Make sense? This course is, God, I'm terrible. Okay, first nights. So let's first learn about ready? So remember, we have this structure where we have the different lessons, and then under the lessons, so the lesson is called a section, and under this we have subsections, and then it then is broken into units, and then this is what we would call a component. So hopefully, is there any way, there's no way to brighten the screen at all, right? Okay, we'll go with it, because it's really about listening, although Tom's wonderful. So I'm going to turn the captions on. I'm going to move the captions a little bit out of the way. And then we're going to watch this full screen. And sing along if you feel it.
There are 3 kinds of peace in Messiah, as you remember. There are 3 kinds of peace in Messiah, as you remember. If you think about who performs them, they're recitative, where somebody talks. They're songs, where somebody sings. and there are choruses. Let's talk about the choruses. You could talk about choruses in lots of different ways, but essentially what they all have in common is that the chorus sings. In Messiah, it's a chorus of 4 different voice parts: sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses. You might have a 3-part chorus, or a 5-part chorus, or a 12-part chorus, but this is really the most common kind of chorus, and the one that Handel uses all the way through: sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses. With the chorus, in all cases, though, there's also the orchestra playing along. So we call it a chorus, but it's really chorus plus orchestra. The choruses, those sections where the chorus sings, tend to be at the ends of groups of pieces. So you might have a recitative, a song, and a chorus, and then a kind of shift of scene and a new recitative, a new song.
You could think about choruses in terms
of fast ones and slow ones, loud ones and soft ones, any number of ways of dividing them up. But let's divide them up according to the way Handel makes them and according to the way we hear them. If we do that, we'll say there's 3 kinds of choruses. We'll call anthem choruses, fugue choruses, and duet choruses. I'll explain what each of those is. An anthem chorus, let's start with that. An anthem chorus really means the kind of thing that Handel does, not only in choruses, but in songs and lots of other places, in which he takes the words that he's going to set to music and studies the words and says, what can I do with these words? And for each phrase of the text, he invents a musical theme, which is the theme for those words whenever those words get sung. You know he does that in the Hallelujah chorus when
somebody sings the word hallelujah.
Somebody sings the word hallelujah, it's to the same tune. When anybody sings for the Lord God omnipotent reigneth, it's always to the same tune, and so on. So you do that, and then you think of ways of giving musical treatment to each of those phrases, and then you put the chorus together in lots of little segments. So an anthem chorus is a chorus which is almost always in lots of little segments that treat the different phrases of the text and often make very cool and interesting combinations. Hallelujah chorus is one. Let's think about another. The first chorus in Messiah has the words, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed. All flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. This is the chorus that we actually will perform live.
We're going to come out of full screen, and we will go down to question number 1. Now notice that you can also download the video, you can download the transcript, and this is an example where I said that people often download the transcript. We download the transcript because they can read it faster than they can watch it. And it may not have been clear, but right here is a place where you can listen, you can watch the video at half speed, regular speed, 1.5 or 2 times. Okay. So, question number 1, which of the following statements is some facet of anthem choruses? And it says, select all that apply. There is a lot of thought that goes into how these are written. Sorry? So, these questions will apply directly to this video. A true or false question is another assessment type that would also apply to the particular video. Now across the top, this is the symbol for our assessment, and we can go either down here and say next, or we can come back up here. But all I'm really trying to get across is the learners will have 3 sets of videos with assessments for each video, but their quiz will be without a video. So let's just see. I just want you to see his teaching style as well.
A second Messiah
a second kind of chorus in Messiah, and lots of other handles, oratorios, and lots of other pieces of music, is a kind of piece called fugue. Now, fugue is one of those words like
But
string
anyway,
quartet
not
and
only are
madrigal
there
and stuff that sort of
captions,
frightens
there
people
are
because they think only learned
transcripts
musicologists know about
that
fugue.
allow you
It's actually kind of the simplest kind of
and you
music
can
there is
search
in a way.
those if you want to
It's
get to a
based
certain
on something that we call imitation. You know what imitation
It
is.
sounds like it's
I
a
sing
second
something,
one and a
and
half
then you
speed,
sing what I
but
just
it's
sang.
really at one
Row, row, row your boat
speed.
is an example.
So this is of course part you might actually want to listen to in a half speed. So and then because he is so phenomenal, I just want to show you one clip. Beautiful screen. I'll just play a little bit. This is one of the performances, and I think we used 7 cameras for this. By the way, this is an example of us working with our school audiovisual team to help us. We were not skilled enough to do the amount of audio capture and camera capture, so we collaborated. My heart. It's so lush. You have to log on and see this place. I just thought, our new annotations tool on video. Going to find sick violinists. I don't know what I'm talking about. But a lot of people do, including our professors. So you could actually use this video and and students could then make comments. This is how it looks like on my screen. It's very, very lush. Very lush. So, now you can watch it now. Very good. Okay, so. But now you log on and watch it, right? Okay. My computer is telling me to stop because it's cooperating. Okay, let's see. So, as you can see, I'm very much overachieved for 2 half-day workshops. But if we were to continue, we would talk about prototyping. Prototype is where you want to put about a week's worth of content on your platform. Very early on in the process, because you don't want to have surprises. You want the faculty to set up. You maybe want to show some potential students and get the flow. Meaning what comes first, what comes second. So try very early on in your process to create this prototype. Post at least a week of content on the target platform. Allows faculty to experience the content from a learner's point of view. It really avoids surprises late in the game. I never thought it would look like this. That's not acceptable. You sort of want to know that earlier than 9 months later. Manages expectations and may provoke additional ideas. And it facilitates user testing for iterative design. So, some couple of quick consejos. Radio makes the picture look better. Approximately 50% of our learners consume content from their mobile devices. Keep your videos short, chunked, add assessments. Demonstrate media types early on in your process, and you don't have to demonstrate, you can show others as long as you're able to produce something similar. Let's see if there's, I'll just show one more. Claymation. This, I have to say, is very challenging to do. It's a combination of claymation and stop action. So this particular art used clay to create for our neuroscience course synapses in the brain. Typically, when you see these types of representations, they're more 2D. The claymation allowed us to be a little more 3D, which we seldom do because it's expensive. This claymation was not very expensive, but it can add up quite quickly. So let's see.
In the last module, we took first steps towards understanding the electrical properties of individual neurons. We learned how electrical forces and diffusion give rise to membrane potentials, and we learned how cells can generate and propagate signals called action potentials, or spikes, along the membrane. Understanding the properties of the neuronal membrane is essential, but understanding just these properties isn't sufficient to give us insight into collective behavior of the billions of connected neurons in our brains. Luckily for us, we can approach neuroscience at many different scales and levels of analysis, and we don't have to confront the full complexity of everything.
Show, another form of media. With that, I think we will end today, except for some more questions. And there's a few more things I want to put into the PowerPoint. So David, I give you everything today, but it won't be complete. I can give you everything complete by the end of the week of June 27th. What's the complete?
We'll wait for the complete version.
Okay.
Yes.
It'll be a very large file, so we'll figure out how to get it to you, maybe Dropbox.
Yes.
Definitely not email. So as you can see, there's much more learned in our Rainbow document, which I hope gives you an introduction and an awareness to types of things to think about when we make our MOOCs. And are there other questions that I can answer for you in our remaining minutes?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, please.
Questions.
Actually, I asked you this question on my way out, and I was curious about the open edX, and if you could like guide us through the steps. You said that it's free for anyone who needs.
Yes. So let me call up yesterday's presentation, and we will put the URL back on board. Okay, so it's altitude sickness, I'm sure. This is the URL to learn more about OpenEdX, and I don't want to give you a false impression. You do need somebody technical in the IT department to download the edX platform package and install it on the server. But if you go to this URL, you will find many instructions. You will find a community, like I mentioned yesterday, there are over 150 institutions. Many are colleges and universities, and some are different types of learning environments. And Stanford is an example. Stanford University in California uses OpenEdX. They do not use the edX platform. They do so because they're right in the heart of Silicon Valley, and they want to innovate. They want to add features, for example, that .org, working with the edX.org platform, which you have to pay to be on. We're a co-founder because of the original investment. But for each university to be on it, it's not, I don't know the pricing, but it's not inexpensive and have to pay fees per course. So you have the balance between, is it more cost effective if you add up all the costs, for example, is it more cost effective to outsource? It's a typical IT issue. Do we do it in-house or do we outsource it to a vendor? Outsourcing to a vendor in this case would be edX.org. If you have the ability and the means to in-house, OpenEdX can be an extremely cost-effective way to do your courses. One example could be, you might want to try it with a couple of courses on campus before you make a massive open online course for the world. Other platforms, Harvard actually uses for their campus platform, we use the software called Canvas. You know Canvas? Yeah, okay. So Canvas provides structure out of Utah. So that's what we use on campus. The reason we don't use it on MOOCs is one, it already invested. We were 3 years into edX before we adopted Canvas on campus. Canvas can be very expensive if you want to make a MOOC because their business model is per learner. So if you don't know how many learners you're going to get, you don't know what expenses will be. But there are pros and cons to all of these different platforms. But some of the most popular, Coursera, edX, Canvas. In the olden days, about 3 or 4 years ago, people are very interested in things like Google or Blackboard. And I don't know why, but people seem to, in some cases, move away from those. Other universities, once you have invested in those, an investment does not always mean how much did it cost for the software. In fact, that's probably normally the least of your expenses. The expenses come in managing and supporting it. Expense comes from how easy is it to use, versus how much training you will have to do. So when you buy software and hardware, that's your original investment. But the cost really over time when you have to pay people to maintain it and to build features that are very specific to your needs. So that was a lot in 2.5 days, but hopefully you're leaving with an excitement to see that it is not surgery. Yes? Except for in our next course.
So first of all, thanks a lot. Really. I mean, it has been really useful. And a suggestion, why you don't make exactly this in a MOOC course?
Yes, we get that.
Not really. I mean, I'm talking about that this has been so useful, and we really need these kind of things. And we are trying empirical to do something, and but giving all these ideas, very structured, very you have 2 afternoons actually will be wonderful. So please, and you are really lively, so very Nigerian.
Well, I really appreciate that feedback, and I was telling David that we're in a very transitional time at Harvard X. Our executive director has recently given notice, and so I've been grateful. So I mean, I'm thrilled she has a wonderful new opportunity, and so a lot of what I've been doing for the last 2 months is my job and taking on some of her responsibilities, which is all good. But that also meant that I made this presentation in the last 2 weeks. And much of it was Sunday, Monday, and this morning. So when I left, before I came here, I was talking to our director. Remember the guy that's really intoxicating and an evangelist? Well, he was recently in Chile, giving a different form of talk. But before I left, he said, wow, why don't we make a MOOC on how to make MOOCs? You know, we entertain approximately 2 to 3 visits from all the world every month. And it's not that we want to not do that because there's no replacement for face-to-face interaction, as I'm sure you all can understand or with. But he said to me, yes, but why don't we just make it into a MOOC? And I've been thinking about that for a while, but all of our faculty driven. But it never occurred to me that they would actually want to do it. So now he actually wants to do it. And he'll be inspired by the stuff that I have prepared here for you and with your great feedback. And part of what I want to do is refine this a little bit more so I can send it to David. So thank you very much for being what I would call our incubator to perhaps Harvard explores about making a MOOC. So I suggest to him that the people have spoken on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Annie, and to all of you on behalf of the Universidad Católica Boliviana, Escuela de Adultos y la Competitividad. Thank you very much for coming. I think we have learned a lot of things of the steps we're doing. We are forward in this direction, and thank you for all, Annie. Been 2 wonderful afternoons, and I think you will have more news from us. Well, we have learned a lot of things, and I would like to share with you some of my impressions. One of those is that Annie said several times, with MIT we did that, with Stanford we did that, so this kind of synergies that we can create, working together, we can do a lot of more things. And thank you very much for being here. We have people from education faculty, from other universities, we have from psychology, from engineering, and it's great to have you all here. And well, let's move forward. Thank you very much, Annie. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, muchas gracias for our translators. Thank you so much, Lucia and Jose. Muy amable, and I hope I am speaking more slowly on the second day.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. And there has been a lot of people preparing all these things. We have Tatiana, we have Jorge, we have Claudia, we have Amanda, and all the people that were working together.
And we have David.